And he adds, "And if, as I have heard from thy holy Candidus," Pope Gregory's representative travelling in Gaul, "thou shouldst be disposed to say in reply, that things confirmed by ancient usage cannot be changed, error is manifestly ancient, but truth which reproves it is ever more ancient still." In this letter, there is proof that the Irish did not belong to the Roman Church at that period, 598 AD, as claimed by Roman writers and churchmen. Even this commentator, whom we have quoted above, is so biased as a Roman adherent that he endeavours seemingly to misconstrue the plain intent and import of this letter by interpreting it as an expression of overflowing affection and reverence felt by Columbanus for the chair of Peter. It was anything but that. It was a direct, unwavering, and dignified condemnation of Gregory's attitude of opposition to the authority of the Irish Pope, Saint Hieronymus, the Latinized form of the name, from Ire. And he inferentially stigmatizes Gregory as a heretic, not neglecting to state that the Irish Pope was considered the true interpreter of the sacred scriptures, and justly so from ancient time and usage. The anema adversion of the writer aforementioned to the extraordinary self-assurance of the Irish schoolmen, which was to exercise the popes and the religious world of Europe generally, leaves us to infer that this attitude on their part was due merely to a consciousness of a superior culture, and in the absence of an explanation, was based on vanity and conceit of learning. That such was not the case is now evident, as we know that their attitude rested upon the very best of ethical and moral grounds. The Roman papacy was a usurper, and Rome's antagonism to the Irish Church antedates the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage. This latter city was an Irish Church colony and foundation, hence the opposition of Rome. The historic cause of the Punic Wars, as given out by church historians, conceals the issue. The Easter question, mentioned in this letter of Columbanus, evidently discussed in reply to previous correspondence with Gregory, cannot be accepted as the real cause of dispute between the Roman and Irish churches. It is too great a strain on credulity to accept as a fact that all the wars, spoliation, and bloodshed instigated by Rome against the Irish Church, and which reacted against her in the overthrow of the empire, were caused by a quibble over a feast day, of Irish origin at that. Rome waged war against the Irish Church colony at Carthage, in North Africa, Spain, Gaul, Britain, Ire, and Germany. She seemed to have grasped the idea early that her successful progress to power could only be through the conquest and acquisition of the Irish Church and papacy. The opportune time for the realization of the ambition finally came in the 12th century AD. The consummation of this long-sought-for effort was brought about through the frenzy of religious excitement which had been aroused on the continent of Europe by Pope Urban and the Roman priesthood, who preached in behalf of the Crusades in the 11th century to enkindle a fierce and warlike spirit in the people against the Mohammedans of the East, and to wrest from them the so-called Holy Land and bring it under the dominion of the Roman Pontiff. This warlike spirit, aroused by Rome in the 11th century, was not allowed to subside in the 12th and was directed against Ire. As England was Roman Church territory, in due time the crusading spirit of conquest in the interest of the Church was directed to that country. The Pope of that day, Adrian IV, an Englishman, who had been chosen Pope on the strength of the probability of his being able to induce the English to attack Ire and bring the Irish Church under the sway of the Roman Pontiff, succeeded in enlisting King Henry II of England to undertake the conquest of Ire in the interest of the Roman Church. For this purpose, the Pope issued a bill authorizing Henry to invade and take possession of the country. This he did, and as the people of Eire had for long been at peace and were engaged in scholastic and spiritual pursuits, they were unprepared to repel such an invasion and onslaught of an armed force. Under such circumstances was the Roman Church brought to Eire, and the great Irish Church of Iessa and her clergy were forcibly brought under the sway of Rome. It was Rome's first advent on the island, either under the Empire or the Papacy. The same zeal for conquest and bloodshed inspired the Teutonic Knights, also born of the Crusades, to wage an exterminating war against the Poles and Slavs, who had refused up to this time to submit to the rule of the Roman Church. The success of the invading force in Eire was aided greatly by the Norman French colony under the leadership of Richard de Clare Strongbow, which had been planted in Ireland about 100 years previously, instituting what in our day is known as the policy of peaceful penetration. As the barbarous Norse and Danes centuries before had been instigated by Rome to war on territory occupied by the Irish Church, it was natural that Duke William of Normandy, of that same racial stock, would be an ally of Rome. He was urged by the Pope of his day to attack England in the interest of his church, the secret reason being that the Roman Church could not compete with the Irish Church in England, as the Irish were the master scholars of Europe and their spiritual culture. Instruction and learning were once more becoming dominant in England, and something had to be done to keep that country under the power of Rome. To accomplish this, she had recourse to her most effective proselyting means, intrigue and the force of the sword. Duke William invaded England in 1066 AD, and 4 years later, in the year 1070, a body of 70 Norman knights adventurers went to Eire, took part in a quarrel between a provincial king and prince and settled there. They formed marriage alliances with many of the leading families and were the first units sent into the country to prepare the way for the successful invasion of the island a century later under King Henry II of England. The part which this first Norman colony played in aiding the conquest of Eire is evident. With this conquest there came to an end the long succession of the Irish Pope kings, whose pontificate extended from time immemorial and whose sway at one time extended over the whole known world. Since the conquest, the name Ireland has been bestowed upon the country. Ar means the end, signifying that Eire's papacy end rule and all it implied had care to an end. Suppressions, lies, interpolations, alterations, and forgeries have all been resorted to blot out and conceal her great past. Her legacies to us were too great to be completely hidden and successfully disguised for all time. Our Bible and the Irish language have made that impossible. With this outline of the suppressed history of the age-long struggle between the Roman and Irish churches and the conquest of Eire and her great church, we will return to consideration of the myth of Noah and the Ark. It is implied in the myth that man is a free agent, exercising the prerogative of free will as to what course he will pursue in each incarnation. In other words, during the period of each earth life, the length of which is stated in the text as 120 years. During each of these earth lives, man is to elect what his conduct will be, for good or for evil, and his reward will be according to his merits. This is the purport of the third verse, Genesis 7, which reads, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is also flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. As the purpose of man's incarnation in the flesh is to achieve spiritual perfection, The results of his progress or advancement accrue to him in much the same manner that good work brings reward and advancement to the diligent student in school. The more conscious man becomes of this purpose and of the goal, which is its end, the perfecting of the solar body, the less will his mind be receptive to evil, such as may engross the mind of the spiritually unconscious man. It is this latter type, the spiritually unconscious, to which the 5th verse applies. It reads, "And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." In considering the import of the 6th and 7th verses, we at once become conscious of the boundless presumption of man in limiting the all-comprehensive prescience of the Almighty and circumscribing him with the radius of man's dwarfed and limited human vision. These verses read in their order, "And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them." In these 2 verses, the revisers put words into the mouth of the Almighty, which make me all-knowing and all-seeing God admit that he made a mistake in causing creation, that he was sorry, and that he had made the earth with all therein, as well as man, and was going to destroy all except Noah, his wife, his sons, and their wives, and those pairs 2 and 2 from the lower orders of life who were to accompany him into the ark. It is a sacrilegious thought. It is tantamount to having the Lord change his mind because his works were a failure, thus making the Almighty a mere fallible being. It is at variance with the declaration of the Almighty, speaking through the voice of the prophet of the ancient sun worship, Malachi, from Malah, the top or brow, a hill, an idiom of the sun worship, as the sun's rays fall on the high elevations first. In Malachi chapter 3:6, where he says, "For I am the Lord, I change not." He is not subject to mistakes. In the 12th verse, we are told that God looked upon the earth, and behold, for it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. This idea is in accordance with the theological conception of the law of correspondences, that outward manifestation is an indication of an inward state. And in accordance with this idea, the physical body of man, during the course of its evolution on the earth plane, and the material elements of which it was itself composed, became foul and sinful, so that the soul which occupied the body was sensitive to its vibrations and was ever tempted to evil through impure emanations and sinful impulses, which were inherent in the spiritually unleavened physical nature. We are told that the earth itself, which brought forth man, was corrupt and filled with violence. Man said, "All flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth." For this reason, we are told, the Lord repented of what he had done and destroyed the earth and the entire human family, with the exception of Noah and his wife, his sons and their wives. The introduction of this tragic circumstance into the story is of course to inject an aspect of the marvelous in order to astonish and mystify, as well as awe, the unenlightened man and keep his mind under the spell of the anointed few. The thought of Noah floating in a vessel or ark in the myth is first a subjective one of the ego descending from the world of spirit to be incarnated in the flesh through generation. It is secondly an allegorical idea representing an objective or physical fact, the 9 months of gestation of the human in the womb of its mother. It is based on the idea that ego or self is in the human seed fluid, which at generation is cast into the receptacle of the womb, which is figuratively given various names and likened unto a ship, a vessel, coffer, basket, bag, and ark, which receives it and in which it gestates. It is this human seed fluid which is the basis for the idea in the myth of the flood or deluge on which Noah and the ark floated. For narrative purpose, other personalities were introduced, but they are closely related to Noah, his wife, his sons, and their wives. The animals which he is said to have gathered into the ark with him are the animal qualities inherent in every man. This occult truth will be more easily understood when the Irish word ark, with its copious meanings, is defined, and the reason for its use in the mythic story will be seen. The word ark means a chest, ark, a dwarf, a pig, bee, a wasp, a lizard, a collection, the body, impost, tribute, small, swift. One of the meanings of ark is the human body, so it becomes clear that Noah, Nao, is afloat in the ship or vessel of his mother's body. In the myth, he is in command of the ark, that is, he is the mariner in charge, and genitive from the word nao, we have the Irish word naori, a sailor. That his animal or lower qualities are what is meant in the allegory, as they are part of Noah himself, and the part of his unspiritual or bodily nature is inferred from Genesis chapter 7:21, which reads, "And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be food for thee and for them." Thus we see that the very same food eaten by Noah sustains them as well as himself, for all combined they constitute Noah, the animal spiritual man. This is the occult truth on which rests the idea, hidden in the myth, of man and the pairs of animals, male and female, afloat in the ark. A command which was given to Noah in Genesis 7:2, and which reads, "Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two the male and the female." It is a covert allusion to the fact that man, to advance his spiritual progress, should cultivate the good qualities in his nature and eliminate the vicious, unclean, and evil qualities. So in the allegory of man's progress, in the guise of the character Noah, who is in a transitional stage and is about to be transformed from the animal to the spiritual state, in the figure of Noah and the prophet, is embodied an occult truth as to the combination of qualities, animal and spiritual, in the personality of man. We are told in verse 14 of this same chapter that the Lord instructed Noah to make an ark of gopher wood, and that he shall pitch it within and without with pitch. This is an obvious allusion to a condition in nature, for if the fetus were not properly sealed in the process of propagation and gestation, the human race would cease to exist on this earth plane. The gopher wood mentioned is an additional fact to show where the original story came from. The word gopher is a slightly altered form of the Irish word gaffer, meaning a little boy or youngster, and this is true to the idea in the myth, which is dealing with the ego or self, sealed up in the packet, vessel, or ark of the mother's womb. The proper form of the word in Irish for this youngster is gafal, meaning a hero, but the word has become corrupted, and in everyday speech it is pronounced gaffer. It is the name of this kind of wood that the revisers have purposely misspelled as gopher. It is the material that little boys or heroes are made of. In the Irish, we are told that seichim wood was a material used in the building of the ark. This is also true to the thought contained in the myth, as the root word of seichim is the Irish word seic, meaning bone. also the peritoneum, and genitive from this word, saic, is the Irish word sein, meaning the membrane that covers the bowels. This is all imaginatively visualized in the development of the embryo, which is sealed up in the ark, in which the ego or personality is embarked for the period of 9 months on a perilous voyage. That such a voyage has ever been considered a perilous one, and that the sailor, Noah, had doubts, fears, and gloomy misgivings as to the successful outcome of the adventure. The Irish word saic also means an adventurer, is implied by sending forth a raven to search for a sign of land. The raven is a symbol of evil forebodings, gloom, fear, misgiving. The dove which he sent out later, and which brought him glad tidings, is a more auspicious symbol signifying peace, joy, happiness, and in the myth is an augury of a successful and safe landing at the end of a long, tedious, and perilous voyage. The story is one more instance of where subjective ideas have been levied upon and made to correspond with the objective phenomena of human generation, gestation, and birth, and the secret purpose of the priests to translate them into objective facts, causing the idealism of the myth to be taught and accepted as history. This conception in the myth visualizes the human ego on a voyage of 9 months in the subjective world before finding a landing place in the objective world, mountain of Ararat, that is, generation into the physical body. In its development, the idea becomes transposed from the metaphysical to its physical aspect of the ego functioning in the human pellicle or ark. In the myth, a mountain symbolizes a fact, and the fact represented by this mountain is secretly embodied in its name. The name word Ararat is genitive from the Irish root word ar, which means ploughing, tillage, and ara, the loin, the repository of the seed, and ara, to plough, to till, hence Ararat, a term in the myth implying generation. Church geographers have applied the name Ararat to a mountain, and the name Armenia, from ar, ploughing, tillage, and men, a woman, and la, a place, to a country in Asia Minor, to give this mythical fiction the appearance of being an actual historic truth. The name Noah harmonizes perfectly in its varied meanings with the idealism embodied in the myth. It is the same with all characters in the old Irish myths and of the mythical characters in our Irish Bible. Noah is one of the old Aryan names that has been but slightly changed from its ancient form by the revisers. The original form of the word is Naioi, pronounced Naha. This name word has several meanings, which are as follows: 9, a man, a person, a woman, a ship, and the man's name Naio, our biblical Noah. From the foregoing, the meaning of the text of Genesis 8:5 becomes clear. It reads, "And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, there were the tops of the mountains seen." Thus, after the full period of 9 months had elapsed, and not going beyond the first day of the 10th month, the voyage of Noah, the little gaffer, came to an end, and he was born into the world. It will be seen further that the birth of the 9 months, Naio, is the chief burden of the myth in its physical aspect, and will be noted by what is covertly and most significantly embodied in the text of Genesis chapter 7:4. It reads, "For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made I will destroy off the face of the earth." The two sacred numbers, 7 and 40, contain the key to the myth. The 40 days and 40 nights simply means 40 days, as a day and a night are contained in each period of 24 hours. By multiplying the number 40 by 7, we have 280 days. As there are 30 days in each month, dividing 280 by 30, we get in round number 9. The remainder is negligible. The number of months that Noah spent confined in the ark before he was welcomed as a member of the household born into the family of his parents. The foregoing exposition shows the physical aspect of the myth of the deluge, Noah and the ark. Its spiritual aspect is cryptically embodied in the episode of Noah planting a vineyard, the wine of which he drank and was drunken. Genesis 9:21. In this cryptic language of the myth, there is a covert allusion to the spiritual development which, in time, Noah accomplished by becoming a husbandman and cultivating a vineyard. This vineyard which he cultivated was within himself, as it is in every man. It alludes to the sympathetic nervous system within the body, along which are located a series of nerve centers or ganglia, in which lie the slumbering man's latent spiritual potencies. In mythical or occult writings, this nerve system is called a vine. The centers along this vine, when aroused by the intensive concentration and the spiritual will of the aspirant, became, as the released force passes from one nerve cluster to another with increased voltage, a powerful agency in the perfecting work of building the solar body. It is this spiritually perfecting wine which Noah imbibed and became intoxicated with, and in the language of the text was drunken. This signifies that he was entirely engrossed and taken up with the cultivation of things of the spirit. The incident of his 3 sons finding him in this drunken condition will now be easily understood when the symbolic meaning of these 3 sons is explained. These 3 sons represent body, soul, and spirit. Japhet represents the personal spiritual ego in man. Shem represents the soul, and Ham, as his very name implies, represents the body and the lower central nature whose seat is in the hips, hence the name Ham, the buttocks. As this lower principle, personified by Ham, has no regard or reverence whatever for the things of the spirit, he is accursed by his father Noah, the now advanced spiritual man. This condemnation of Ham implies the separation which takes place in the advanced man when the qualities of the higher nature are developed, the lower ones being eliminated, as no part whatever of the lower nature can permanently adhere to the higher spiritual nature or solar body. Shem and Japhet represent the higher soul and spiritual qualities, and these 2 characters cover Noah with a blanket, which implies that they were at one with him and he was with them. As Ham, the lower nature, could only visualize the central aspect of Noah, Shem and Japhet recognized his spiritual nature, and their conduct in the myth of walking backward towards their father, Noah, implies that they did not look upon their father's condition in the same manner as did Ham. It was quite the reverse. As the figurative character names suggest, Shem is the immortal soul nature from the Irish Sam, the son Japhet, the personal spiritual. Ego in man is from the Irish root word ea, fire, the spirit. From this word, there were takes different forms such as I, Il, Yah, Yahweh, Yah, Yov, Japhet, and Jehovah. Ham is here in the text made identical with the character Canaan, the son of Ham. In Genesis 9:25 it reads, "And he said, Cursed to be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." This signifies that Canaan, the lower or bodily nature, shall serve as it was intended in the divine plan that it should, as a servant or vehicle for the soul and spirit to function, and while the ego is here on the earth plane. Canaan is from the Irish root word ka, a house, and na, the soul, and an, small or little. Hence, Canaan, the little soul nature, that is, the lower personality or bodily nature, the man of little soul development. This explanation makes clear the meaning of the 26th verse, which reads, "And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant." That the character Japhet represents, as stated, the advancing spiritual ego in man, may be seen in the 27th verse, which reads as follows: God shall enlarge Japhet, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. The statement that Japhet shall be enlarged and dwell in the tents of Shem signifies that he is the advancing spiritual aspirant, and as he advances in his soul growth and holiness, he shall be enlarged in spiritual increase. That this advancing spiritual man is also to reach his goal may be seen from the fact that he is to dwell in the tents of Shem. The name word Shem is an Irish name of the sun from Sam and Sam, thus implying that Japhet will succeed in building his solar body. In the cryptic language of the myth, a dweller in tents implies the advancing spiritual man, as already explained in the characters Abel and Javal, the son of Lamech by his wife Ada, Victory, in the chapter of the children of Cain. In the story of Noah and the Ark, it can be seen from the Irish names of its characters that it is an ancient Aryan allegory embodying the idea of the incarnation of the ego or self through generation and gestation in the body for a period of 9 months before birth, and the development and growth of the spiritual ego in man, regeneration. This, in brief, can be inferred from the Irish name of the character Nio, meaning 9, a man, a person, Noah, a man's name, and Niori, a sailor, and genitively from Nio we get Niob, a saint or holy man, hence the patriarch Noah. It is only through the Gaelic, the original language of our stolen Irish Bible, that this true, literal, and logical interpretation could be made of these mythical character names of Noah and his sons in the story of the Ark.